Is there any other response to that question? Has anybody ever gone and been like, I am terrible today? I think we're going to get started here in a minute. We're good? All right. Well, this is the new SOC, Human Specialist Leading AI Analyst. And my objective for this next 20 minutes is for you all to leave here thinking about a new way in which AI can positively impact the SOC. Specifically, we're going to be talking about SOC analysis, that thing that we don't really talk about much but is wedged between detection and response, detection, analysis, response. We're going to do that by first going through a primer of what does SOC analysis look like today, make sure we're all speaking the same language, and we're going to talk about how the SOC analysis process of today actually reintroduces risk into organizations. And then we're going to close by discussing the role AI can take in this process moving forward. But first, I'm John Bagg. 10 years of cyber experience, started my career with Verizon MSS, doing blue team analytic build out for their various MSS products. And then the next portion of my career was spent technology consulting with Fortune 100 type organizations, helping them build out their own cyber big data analytics capabilities. Worked with a lot of interesting organizations in that time and saw a lot of interesting problems. I look like this sometimes, and my interesting fact is I like to ski. Now I am the co-founder of a company called Salem Cyber, based out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is about an hour and a half west of here. And there's a couple of things that we believe that I think are relevant for this discussion. First, we believe complex analysis requires human creativity. We're an AI company that believes in the power of people, which is a strange thing these days. And we're envisioning a world where AI applications are specifically used to scale the impact of people's knowledge and expertise. Now, this is not intended to be a demonstration of our capabilities, but philosophically what we're going to talk about today is aligned with the reason that our company exists. So I might at the end add in a little pitch if you all will begrudge me that, but the purpose of today is to talk a little bit more theoretically. So to get the conversation started, let's talk about detection. What does detection look like today? Everybody here likely works for an organization or wants to work for an organization. Jagdish, I see you there. That has invested pretty heavily in detection tools that monitor data and look for suspicious, malicious activity. And the output is basically always a cybersecurity alert with the intention that somebody will review that activity and potentially take an action if necessary. All of these alerts roughly say the same thing. Something happened. Given the right context, that something is bad. So those alerts go to cyber analysts, and what do? Well, they review the context of that specific alert. They add this lens of industry knowledge from their training and experience, and then they overlay that further with this lens of institutional knowledge. What do I know about my organization? What's important to us? How do we use IT systems? What are our threats, risks? If you've been a cyber analyst, you also know about the skeletons in the closet. And all of that information together allows them to come up with an assessment of whether this particular instantiation is a threat or acceptable business activity. In fact, they do this incredibly well. I like to assess that if you have an analyst and you take any alert out of the data stream and you hand it to that analyst, they can pretty much always come to the right assessment of whether threat activity exists or there's acceptable business action. The problem is that they don't do this well at scale. And in fact, there's a number of reasons for this. So there's alert volumes, which you all know about. There's high repetition of investigations. Investigative process has them performing the same actions over and over again. And then there's this fun one of time pressure that we artificially layer on top of people with SOC metrics. We want to lower our mean time to detect or mean time to respond. So now we have less time to do the work that we were doing before. And as more tools come online, more IT transformation, more data systems, it just creates more and more pressure for the SOC. That pressure leads to alert fatigue and analyst burnout. And to further make this problem difficult, There are a lot of alerts. If I were to tell you that your organizations, if they took every technology that you have today that does threat detection, and you were to turn everything on, it would produce likely something on the order of 11,000 cyber alerts a day. And actually, I don't see them in here. I had a conversation with somebody today who turned on a tool that produced 1.4 million cyber alerts when they turned on all of its feature and functionality. And in our observation, through my experience and conversations, we think most SOCs can perform about 100 investigations during that same period of time. And so that is a ratio for every 1,100 detectable events in your environment, you can investigate one of them. Now, if I was listening to this, I'd have a number of questions. The first one that we'll tackle is, how do we go from 1,100 to 1? How do you take this huge detectable space and winnow that down to the alerts, the 100 that you're going to investigate? Well, I told you a little bit briefly that I used to be a blue teamer. And so this is going to be a rough approximation about what happens, and maybe some of my frustration will come through here. But effectively what the SOC likes to do is line up all of your use cases from noisiest to least noisy and draw a line and say, we can handle use cases that are this noisy. Now they'll say high confidence, which is the word that we like to use to say a low noise use case or a low false positive use case. Because that's where they get the most value out of spending their time, which to me makes a lot of sense. You can only do a certain amount of work. Let's focus on where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. But what does that leave for everything else? All of these use cases that are to the left of this line, frankly, a lot of them get turned off at the tool. When we say out-of-the-box use cases don't work. We might do some threat hunting. We might perform some sort of alternative analysis and correlation engines and so forth. But effectively what you're getting is at best partial coverage of these types of detectable events. Now the problem is organizations at the management level have invested in tools. And everybody here who's been an engineer and analyst will know somebody comes and says, we bought this new tool. It's going to provide us this coverage. It's going to reduce our risk in this way. And things are going to be great. And then once you get down to the SOC level, either literally those things get turned off, or effectively they're turned off because the alerts are being ignored. So you have an organization that thinks that they have bought down risk, that they actually haven't bought down because there's a bottleneck in how we do analysis that doesn't allow the value of that product to come forward. Now, the good news in this story is that really what we're talking about is a capacity constraint. And throughout the industrial age of us, we have created machines specifically to solve two types of problems: capacity and consistency. And what we're seeing right now in how artificial intelligence is being used across various industries is that it can be very effective at performing analysis at scale. And so there's a huge opportunity here to say, we have this process, it works really well, we know exactly how it needs to be done, but there isn't enough people time to do it. The opportunity becomes, can we leverage AI to fill in that gap, to do that other analysis in the same way a person would, to provide the scale and coverage, to give us risk reductive ability and better value out of the tools that we've invested in. And so here, I think there's a couple of examples of where AI has solved scale problems in other industries. My favorite, probably because my co-founder is crazed about checking his Zillow home estimate value as it goes up and down with the market. But effectively what Zillow has done is they have created an AI that can estimate the value of a home in probably a similar way to what a person would do, certainly not as good, but they can do it at a scale where every day everybody can get what they feel is an accurate value of an asset. And that is a problem where you could have never had enough people to perform that layer of analysis. It just wouldn't happen. And that's the same thing that we're talking about here. There's no organization that I know of that can afford to staff a SOC to monitor 11,000 daily alerts or more. So what we're really talking about is if we can take a cyber analyst and pair them with an AI machine, then all of a sudden we can have the capacity to investigate what is detectable in our environment. And what that will end up looking like is a bifurcation of workflow where you still have priority alerts going straight into your SOC, and you have an AI analyst performing a similar investigation on the bulk of everything else to identify those 1, 2, and 3 things out of this whole bucket of noise that's probably relevant for somebody to look at, and they can escalate it back over. And so from a risk reductive, from an executive perspective, you're now getting the value out of those technologies, your IPSs, your UABA products, your other kind of like AI-enabled anomaly detection products that detect interesting things, but maybe too many interesting things, where previously you couldn't have coverage before because, frankly, you didn't have the time to analyze that activity. And, well, a little bit of a duplicative slide, but basically what we're talking about, SOC specialist, AI analyst, leads to reduced risk. And a whole lot of other benefits that we talked about. I think one of the ones that's most interesting in this equation, we haven't necessarily talked about how the role of, like, where is the role of a person? In this model, what we really feel, if we go back to that initial slide on how an analyst performs their function, they take this industry knowledge layer, and they take this context within the data, and then they take this layer of institutional knowledge. And so when we're talking about a SOC specialist, what we're really talking about is somebody who knows how to investigate activity within the context of a specific environment, and then pairing them with a machine that they can then teach how to perform that investigation at scale. So what I'm asserting is if we know how to do something well, and we know how to do it well once, and we can build a machine that can learn how to perform that same type of investigation, how to add that same context, how to identify what's normal and abnormal within an environment, then we can do that at scale and get improved consistency, capacity, and ultimately a risk reductive story. So this is where I get to a little bit pitchy, so apologies in advance, but our product, Salem, is an AI cybersecurity analyst that's trying to do this exact function. And we're announcing very excitedly today for the first time ever here in Raleigh, North Carolina, that our product, Salem, is available in the Azure Marketplace. So if you're interested in this story, I encourage you to come see us at our booth or visit our website, or invite me over for Thanksgiving. I'm just down the road. I'd love to have a conversation about how a capability like this can help you all achieve your monitoring objectives. So to round out my talking portion here, I just wanted to leave with a thought, and a thought specifically on the value of AI. I started my interaction with AI through my career as a skeptic. I thought anomaly detectors work really well in their use case, which was in the Amazons of the world, the product recommendations, the spaces where the cost of being wrong is quite low. And I've come to realize that there are great applications of AI when we choose to ask the right question. And so when I'm evaluating our own capabilities in other products, I like to think, where is the person in this process? And I like to look for AI applications that specifically are tailored to complementing what people already do well, and to do that well at scale. So that is the conclusion of what I came prepared to speak. Can I ask for any questions or comments from the room? No? Anybody wondering about how this is different than an automation strategy? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Okay. We talk a lot about automation right now. I think there's really great automation platforms that exist that try to solve the wide problem of how do I take any process and make that repeatable in a decision tree type of way. And what we're talking about, this class of product, which is not only going to be us on the market, there's a couple of other things percolating as well, is really going deep and saying this one particular process is one of our most severe bottlenecks, and if we focus on how to do one process well, we can go significantly deeper. And so we see this as a complementary capability to SOAR and other components of an existing data stack or cyber tech stack. We also think, I told you my experience in MSS. One of the dirty secrets of big company SOCs is also the dirty secret of MSS. They are capacity constrained as well. And so when we are looking forward to what this world looks like, we see MSS providers who are resistant to do certain types of monitoring because it's difficult to do with the capacity that they have. And so I think there's opportunity here for this type of technology to coexist in those spaces as well, where you're augmenting an almost pre-tier one with a managed service provider, again, to handle some of the bulk problems and the types of use case that are more behavioral driven, less precise, but still represent common attack vectors that we can detect within the environment. So, okay.
So if I was silly and use Azure over AWS, how does your product fit in with something like Microsoft Sentinel?
How does it fit in with Sentinel? So we like to think that our product lives off the side of a SIEM and really other detection tools. So what Sentinel is doing is kind of a big data analysis problem, and the output in a lot of cases is either replayed alerts from other security platforms like Defender or analytics that it's run and produced kind of bespoke alerts. And so what we would do is then take alerts from that platform, push them into our own platform, do an analysis, and then kick them back and update the context within Sentinel with what we found, and provide a assessment of likelihood based on the context that we were able to cobble together. And so it would be a little bit transparent to the end user of Sentinel. We don't want to be another console. I like to tell this story, although it hurts a little bit. When I was doing Splunk engineering work, I would build lots of what I felt were really cool dashboards. And then I built a dashboard for myself to show me how many times people opened my other dashboards. And the results were so depressing that I deleted that dashboard. Nobody wants to see a different view. And so we're finding ways to work within the confines of other products. And so specifically, our main integration is actually with Microsoft Teams. And the idea is, how do you gather as a machine, how do you gather institutional knowledge? It's not in the data, it's knowledge passed from person to person. And so we built a framework where we use Teams to propose little vignette questions to gather specific context to say, I need to know whether this account is a service account or not. And you might know the answer based on the format of how the name is constructed. You might know because you looked up in another system. You might know for some other reason. If I can ask you that question, and then I can ask you how you know the answer, and then I can mine the higher level truth from your response, then I can then perform that same action at scale in a way that's unique to your organization, but applying this level of global context that I can feed into AI that's trained at like an industry level. And that's kind of how we gather that institutional knowledge, and that's what takes us from being another product that just remines the same data to a capability that is learning from the people in your environment that truly understand how to investigate what's important, how they apply context in particular situations. Not really what you asked, but I'm a little bit of a talker, so.
I like it.
You like it? Cool. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me speak today, and I release you unto lunch.